by People G2, a nationwide leader in background checks and employment screening solutions. People G2 gives their clients access to the best human capital management and due diligence tools available. They are dedicated to helping their clients with all of their people-related decisions. To learn more, go to www.peopleg2.com. Talent Talk centers on the topics of talent recruitment and management, leadership development, company culture, and employee engagement. These are all timely topics for CEOs, entrepreneurs, HR professionals, and business leaders. We hope that as you tune in to listen each week, whether to the live broadcast or to the podcast on iTunes or iHeartRadio, that you hear something you can take away that will help you grow and impact your career in a positive way. And now, here's the host of the Talent Talk Radio Show, the founder and CEO of People G2, Chris Dyer.
Good afternoon, and thank you for tuning in to Talent Talk. It's Tuesday. It's 1 o'clock here live, and that always means that we are here to talk about talent and to talk to really talented people who maybe have something that they can share with us that we can learn from. And that's really kind of how this show began, that I had for years been spending my time in conferences and talking and getting people to maybe have a call with me and to learn what was making them tick. What were they worried about? What were they thinking about? What were the books that they were reading? And this show's kind of turned into an opportunity for everyone else to listen in on that conversation and be able to hopefully learn something. And, you know, much like you might want to might want to ask someone these questions, you actually can. So we live tweet the show on Twitter. You can follow @PeopleG2 or the hashtag Talent Talk, all one word. Typically, Angela's the one doing that, but today we have Tina popping in as a substitute tweeter, and hopefully she can keep up with us today. But we will be putting all the best one-liners, the best comments, links to books, links to profiles, so that you can keep the conversation going with our guests, with me, and let us know what you think. Now, we've had so many wonderful stories come from this show. A lot of them went into my first book, The Power of Company Culture. You can find that wherever you buy your books, on Amazon or wherever it may be. But, you know, we've really been talking about COVID and remote work and so much of that over the last year. In fact, I have a book coming out here at the end of May, and it's called Remote Work. So if you want to pre-order that book on Amazon, now is the time to do it. Don't forget to be a part of the conversation, and also make sure to subscribe. So you can be found on our podcast after the live show is done on Spotify, iHeart, iTunes, wherever you find your podcast. We're there, talenttalkradio.com. If you subscribe, that makes sure that you always get reminded when a new interview is up. And so, you know, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and talk about who's on the show this week. My guest on the show will be Joe Patterson, founder of the Vested Group and Forbes Books author, The Big Commitment: Solving the Mysteries of Your ERP Implementation. After the commercial break, we'll bring in Jason Barger, Step Back Leadership Consulting and founder. But let's go ahead and get to my first guest. Joel, welcome to the Talent Talk Radio Show.
Thank you, Chris. Happy to be here.
Fantastic. Well, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself? You know, what's important for us to know about you, and of course, let us know, you know, kind of what you do, what your company does, and the type of work that you tend to focus on.
Sure. As the book title says, we are in ERP consulting, and most people don't know what that is, and that's perfectly fine. It's another acronym for the IT world, but really what we do is we work with companies that are looking to grow their business or maybe go into new service lines and know that the software that runs their company isn't supporting them. And so we go in and work with them to define what their future state is going to look like. And we work with an Oracle product called NetSuite that can run their entire organization. And our job is to make sure that it does what it's supposed to do. Today, I know we're talking a lot about culture, and I'd say that our organization is definitely a culture-first company. We work in an industry that is really challenging. You know, when we go in and do these implementations, it's very difficult. You know, I mean, we're changing everything for a company, and everybody's job is going to change. And so there's a lot of upset people a lot of times, right? Because most people don't like change. And so for us, having a solid culture for our consultants to rely upon is extremely important to keeping them engaged.
So as you go in to think about change, what's the first thing that you have to really identify or figure out if you're going to be successful in the long run in implementing that change?
Well, the first step is just admitting you have a problem, right? I mean, and being able to identify that and tell people, hey, this is going to be hard. No matter what you were told when somebody sold you something, going through a entire overhaul of your infrastructure like this is very difficult. And knowing that going in really kind of sets the stage. And so then as you're going through the project, you got to make sure you're continuing to touch base with those people. Let them know that that struggle is okay. We have this thing we call the valley of despair. And really it's just a change curve. And again, recognizing that people are going to sink into that valley at some point during the project and get frustrated and angry. But know that if you stick with it and you follow the process and believe that you're going to get through it. And our job is to mitigate some of that risk and pave the way for them to get there and let them know that it is possible and they will be successful long-term.
So a lot of change management processes start, with somebody defining value, someone saying this is what we're really about, right? And sometimes it's well done, it's intentional. Sometimes it's a bunch of lip service with some words thrown up on a wall, right? So how do you kind of define what core values really are? And to that point, like, what are you seeing inside of organizations? Is this something that they're doing a really good job of being in tune with and being aligned with, or is it more the lip service and that's, causing some of the issues that you're having that need the change?
I think it's the tide is shifting, but there are still a lot of companies out there that either they don't believe or they haven't taken the time or they just don't know what to do. But if you look back in the last 20 years and things like mission statements and core values and things, they've unfortunately been thrown around with a little too much, a little too often, I guess, and don't necessarily have the oomph behind them that they need. And what we've tried to do is really take those seriously, define them in ways that people understand and that make sense and are simple to understand. We've defined 6 core values in our company. Our first one, own it, all in, give them your shirt, enjoy the ride, always do the right thing, and remember that failure results in learning. And each one of those has a description as to what that means, but we live and breathe them. Our hiring process includes those core values so that we can ask value questions while we're talking to the recruit, as well as our firing decisions. We've taken it to the point where if that person does not live up to those values, then that is a fireable offense. Now, obviously there's a lot of steps in between to get to that point, but you have to believe them and talk about them and make sure that they're constantly in people's consciousness, or they will just be a picture on a wall, and that's not going to really do any good for anybody.
Well, one of the things that I hear when you listed your core values was they were very specific, right? They were unique. There was some things in there I'd never heard before, like the get the shirt off your back kind of a thing, right? That you can tell that they were thought about and that they were intentional. I've done a lot of work with companies that go in and they'll be like, yeah, our core values are trust. And these very like generic words, right? And these are also the same companies that are saying right now, we've got to get our people back in here. They just can't possibly work and collaborate, remotely. And obviously their trust means, well, we could see you. We knew you were here. We didn't really trust you. We just trust our ability to watch you, right? Yes. And they weren't really tied, right? And so there's this disconnect to the values, right?
For sure. And another piece that we really plays into this even more importantly is our purpose. And the purpose of our company is what we call best job ever. And what we're trying to do is we want people, when they are retired someday and they're talking to their grandkids about their career and their grandkids says, hey, well, tell me about the best job you ever had. We want them to talk about their time here. And that means something different for each person, right? And what we actually need to do to keep them engaged and motivated. But those values support that. And they allow us to be able to really have any conversation that we need. One of the values that is most difficult for us to really dive into is the remember that failure results in learning, but it's the most important as far as I'm concerned. My company, the Vested Group, this is the second company that I've founded. And my first company, we did really well early on for 5, 6, 7 years and took off. And it really did well because the owners were able to be involved in the culture. But as we grew, We didn't have a plan to support that. We didn't really know what to do with it as people became virtual. And when I started this company, it was from day one, hey, I learned that is not the right way to do it, and that this is the most important thing. And we built our focus and our goals around that. And it's served us really well in a tough industry.
So, I know you're sort of on the technical side, and you're going in and providing, a particular technological approach into a change management system, or to get people, the help that they need. But do you think there's something that we need to think about doing on that side of it, around culture, around social media, about, the intentionality of how is it the things that the technology and the non-human parts, right? This is not HR supporting culture. This is how does the technical side of it support culture from your perspective?
Yeah, it definitely does. And I think the mistake that some companies make is that they think just implementing new technology is going to solve their problems. And really, it still takes the people behind the scenes to make it happen. I'll give you a good example. We use Slack very extensively in our organization, and we also use Tiny Pulse. Which is, if you're not familiar with it, it's an HR tool. It provides a lot of different things. But one of the things that it does is it creates a Slack channel for us called Cheers for Peers. And what that allows you to do is you can at any time, if you are working with one of your colleagues and they exemplify a core value that you want to share with the rest of the company, you go in there to that Slack channel and you can do a cheers for peers for them. You reference the value that you saw and you give an example, and the whole company sees it. And it's a very simple thing, but I can tell you, even just today, there's been 3 or 4 of them. It happens every single day. And it's a very simple way to make sure that those values are continuing to be in the consciousness, in the conversation. And it allows you, especially in this time of COVID, to stay connected with people. It allows you to see what their work rate is. Every time that somebody gets that, a cheer, is we have a sticker that represents that core value. And we take that sticker and we put it on our laptop. And it's kind of like, Ohio State has their wins on their helmet with stickers. It's the same thing. And what that does is it allows us to, I've got stickers on my laptop, and I can't tell you how many times if I'm at the airport or if I'm working with a prospect, they'll ask me about them. And it gives us an opportunity to continue to talk about our culture, because that's really, we're in consulting. Our product is really our people. And so it allows us to talk to customers about how we invest in those people and make sure that we keep them close. And it really starts with the technology piece. So it's all important, but you still have to have the intention on the other side from the people.
So I would like to kind of break this down a little bit for those that are listening, because this is really, really important. We use a similar type thing in our company. We use Slack, and we have just a water cooler room, and that's where we go and we do it. And I love the sort of addition that you've added on, right? Which is to really go back and have these stickers and have some way to additionally celebrate it for the long term. But I think what's important for people to remember is there was a specific place on a specific technology. There's a specific way to do it, and anyone can do it, right? This is not top down. This is not my manager had to tell everyone else I did a good job. This is anyone can nominate anybody. And so you've removed that hierarchy, removed all of the power and the politics and the butt kissing and all of that by making this a flat thing, right? That's anyone can nominate anybody for exemplifying this, right? You've identified what's important, and now you're celebrating it. And I think that's really awesome. And kudos to you guys for adding on that extra element of adding it to your computer, so that when COVID's over and you're going to see more people, all right, it's a conversation starter, and then they can know more about you. I think that's super important, which I find those types of programs to be far more beneficial than rewards-based programs. Are going to give out some Starbucks card, or we're going to take a tally of how many times you got mentioned and you get 5 points or something. Like, it gets gamed, it gets forgotten. This is far more memorable, I think, the way that you guys have decided to approach it.
Yeah, there's no doubt. You're right. It's not, I've never even thought about it as a way for somebody to kiss up at all. To be honest with you, I probably get fewer cheers than just about anyone else, because I'm not in the weeds with right. A lot of the people that I work with, and that's great. I love that. I don't need the accolade. I like it just like anybody does. I feel good about it when somebody says that, but I sure love giving them out too. It's because it allows me to interact with people that I don't get to necessarily interact with a lot. And so if I find myself in a meeting with them and they ask a good question or whatever, it just, there's just always reasons to give somebody a pat on the back. And I think in COVID culture, it's even more important that we find ways to do that and to make sure people feel validated and that they're recognized for the efforts that they're putting in. Because you mentioned earlier about, companies that didn't have a culture and that hadn't focused on culture, and yeah, they got to be hurting right now. But it doesn't change the fact that companies like ours that have focused on culture, our people are still hurting too, and we want to really go above and beyond to make sure that they know that we're out there, we care. We are interested in what's going on in your daily life. And if there's anything that we can do to support you, let us know. And it really gives us the avenue to do that.
Right. And just to say it again, people just want your attention. They just want that pat on the back. They want that, hey, this was something that I saw that you really did well. This connects to what we're trying to do. And of course they want, hey, this is what you could maybe do better next time. Where can you, improve? But we spend so much time worrying about how do we give feedback to people when really what they want most is where am I doing well, right? And how did I do well? And recognizing that they did well, and again, making it public, right? At some level, it's not pulling someone up on the stage and everybody wants to be brought in front of the room, but at least there's some level of it can be seen across the organization so that they, there's that level of people can know that they're good at this thing. If somebody needs someone to do that thing, well, I know Susie keeps getting this award for that. I'm going to bring them into this project or into this, client meeting or whatever it may be. So, I just want to kind of reiterate that for anyone who's listening, because it's a super important point. They're simple things and they're subtle, but they're hugely important. And I think most recognition programs gloss over it because they want you to buy gift cards from the company so they can make money, or they want, some other part of this just isn't working. So
yeah, those $5 gift cards, they just sort of slip into somebody's pocket and you don't even think about it. And it even goes back to pay, right? And what is salary? How does that play into culture and how people feel? And by no means salary is important, right? It is absolutely important, but it is a data point. You've got to make sure that your people are paid equitably, they feel valued that way, but then they can move on. And it's all this other stuff that really makes a difference. You're not going to be able to get away with underpaying people because you're investing in something else, not in my business at least. And I don't want to. I want to pay people what they deserve, but I don't really want that to be the main conversation. And especially in hiring, and that unfortunately becomes a big part of it. Well, you wrap that with everything else that we've got going on, and all of a sudden the picture looks much different as they're making their decision.
Yeah, I always thought those companies that do here's a 1% salary increase each year or some tiny thing. It's you don't even notice it on your check. You don't feel good from that, right? They'd be better off handing you that 1% in the middle of the year for some random reason as a bonus, if that's what they wanted to do. And even that I think is misplaced. But how do you even notice 1% on your check?
It kind of comes down to the Jelly of the Month Club with Clark Griswold, right?
Right. How is this helpful to me?
Yeah.
So, you've hit on the recognition part, you've hit on the values part as well, but what else should we be thinking about from a culture focus, especially maybe during the interview process?
Well, I tell you that, you've got to hire for culture fit and drive first. Obviously you're looking for skills, but you've really got to make sure that they fit the culture. Otherwise they're going to flame out. And I've found that in really strong cultures, good, strong cultures, the culture sort of takes care of the people that accidentally get in that aren't a fit, right? And not in a bad way. There's nothing wrong with them necessarily. It just means that it's not for them, and that's okay. And the culture kind of weeds those people out. But you've really got to put the extra effort into the front end interview process. We do this thing called a Sunday test that we ask people to think about when they're interviewing candidates. And that is, if this person is sitting across from you came to work here and they called you on a Saturday night and said, hey, I've got this deadline. I really need your help tomorrow on Sunday. Can you come into the office and help me out? How are you going to respond? And that is that's going to be different for everyone. And you're just interviewing this person. You don't really know them, but you got to trust your instinct here, because you know the types of people that you're trying to bring in, you know what works and what doesn't, and really think about that. Do they pass the Sunday test? And if they do, then they'll move on to the next round. But sometimes you just get that feel that this person is in it for a different reason, and that's not going to work here.
Yeah, and some people are really good at talking the talk. I mean, they can say that they agree with that, but then, can they give you an example right in the past? Can they Can they demonstrate that this is something they've done on a consistent basis at their job or their past jobs? I mean, that's where I find people struggle sometimes if they're not quite that person, if they're not quite aligned. It's, if I said, if I was working this weekend, I really needed someone, would you help me out? Oh yeah, sure I would. But then when you hire them, they're like, nowhere to be found.
It's like when somebody asking you to help you move.
Yeah, of course I would help you. Oh, Saturday? No, I'm busy.
You have a truck, right? Let's go. Yeah, no, it's going to be different by person, but I think that people understand the concept, and it allows you to get to some of those behavioral type of questions that are the most important ones to answer as you're going through this. Now, like whenever I interview somebody, I rarely talk about their skill set. It's always about fit and how they are. Now, there's other people that are going to interview them that are going to really drill into their skill set, and that is important, but I'm not looking for that at all. I really want to know, is this a person that I want to spend time with? Because, one of the things that I really focus on is this concept of work-life balance. And I hate that term because I think it implies that one is good and the other one is bad. And that's not reality, right? Nobody really is able to completely turn off their job when they go home, and vice versa. I mean, if you have a bad day at home, you're probably going to have a bad day at work. And recognizing that is a big part of our culture as well, that hey, I'm not asking you to work 1 million hours, but I want to know that you're doing okay personally, and not into their details or anything, but just knowing that they're managing okay, because I know that is going to keep them more engaged and more productive at work as well. And it's just the right thing to do. And so if you recognize that it's not taboo to get to know somebody personally and care about them, that is actually part of making sure that you've got a culture that works. And I think a lot of times people, especially with this kind of world of compliance, HR compliance that we've fallen into these days, they worry about being able to ask some of those questions or get to know somebody personally. And I completely disagree with that. There's a way to do it without being invasive, but it's important to have that personal connection to really know whether or not this person's going to fit.
Right. And to know if they're going to fit, I think it often will take more than, just speaking to one manager who's maybe the direct report, or maybe just the senior team. I mean, what are your thoughts on maybe having the candidate really interact with the everyday staff and people that they're going to have to work with as a way to, discover if they're going to be a good fit?
Yeah, I think you're really doing yourself a disservice if you don't. So the way our process is pretty well defined. And the first thing that we do is we ask people to send us a 2-minute video and we don't give them much instruction. We just say, hey, tell us why you're a good fit for the vested group. And the thing is that's interesting about that is maybe the first couple of times you watch one of those videos, you're not going to gather a lot of information from it. But when you watch 100 of them, you really see a difference in the candidates, and it helps set the stage and just make sure that they're a good fit for you. And then when we bring them in, we go through several rounds at different levels of people, because in my mind, if that candidate isn't interviewing you as well, then there's something off. You want them interacting with different levels in the organization, because it's one thing for me to say what we're about, but it's another for somebody that's been working here 6 months and somebody that's been working here 5 years to tell you what they see. So making sure that you have the opportunity to interact with them at various levels, and making sure that they feel comfortable that the people that we have already fit within what their expectations are is just as important. So I would absolutely encourage anyone to let your staff or your recruits talk to different levels of the staff, and find a way to have a casual setting, whether it's over lunch or something like that, to really be able to have a conversation that's not over in a boardroom or something. Right. Take a little bit of the pressure off and allow them to kind of free flow.
Well, 2 quick questions. We're almost out of time here. The first is there a book that you're reading these days that you might suggest people check out?
Well, this isn't going to surprise anyone, maybe, because it's pretty popular already, but I'm almost done with Bill Gates' new book, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster. And I got to tell you, that guy, he's obviously a genius, right? But the way that he's able to take complex scenarios and boil it down to something that any of us can understand is really remarkable. And it's a great read. I'd encourage anybody to take a look at it.
And most importantly, how can people get a hold of you if they're interested in learning more or wanting to work with you?
So the company domain is thevested.com, or you could go to joelpatterson.com. Either way, I would love to learn about you, your business, what your goals are, and see where we might be able to help.
Well, Joel, thank you so much for being a great guest today and sharing some fantastic insights. I'd love to have you come back at some point and share with us all the cool stuff that your company's doing.
Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to next time. Take care.
Right back after this quick commercial break, and we'll bring in my second guest, Jason Barger.
Imagine buying a newspaper and discovering that the news you're reading is 6 months old. There isn't much that stays the same for 6 months. And the same thing goes for background checks. In a time when so much outdated information is being passed around, it's good to know that People G2 offers something different. At People G2, we provide today's intelligence, not yesterday's news. Our value-added approach offers you a fully FCRA-compliant solution that includes up-to-the-minute information. By combining industry-leading technology with old-school human investigation, People G2 is able to give you information that is accurate right now, delivered quickly through our online system, or integrated with your HR system. So ask yourself, are you comfortable working with old news, or are you ready for a different kind of background check company? Visit peopleg2.com or call 800-630-2880. That's 800-630-2880 or peopleg2.com.
Welcome back to the Talent Talk Radio Show. In case you missed my first guest, don't worry. You can subscribe to our podcast on iHeart, on iTunes, on Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you find your podcast. We're there. Just look for Talent Talk, look for Chris Dyer, and you can subscribe and never miss a show. You can also go to talenttalkradio.com. That's a great place to find all of our past shows, find out more about our guests, and interact with us there. Don't forget, we are live tweeting this. So if you're following along on Twitter at PeopleG2 or the hashtag Talent Talk. And today, Tina is listing all of the best quotes, links to profiles, links to books, anything important that comes up. We're making sure we place it there as well. In case you're driving, in case you can't write it down at that moment, we've stored it for you somewhere else. But all right, let's go ahead and get to my next guest, who is Jason Barger. He is Step Back Leadership Consulting founder. Well, I guess, Jason, welcome to the show today. Oh, I think you're on mute here. This is the saying of 2021. I think you're on mute. So there we go. We got you. Go ahead. Welcome, Jason.
Hey. How are you, man? Good to see you again, man. Good to be back.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you here. And looks like maybe your background's changed a little bit. I think everyone's gotten their backgrounds a little bit better these days. So anyways, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself, what's important for us to know about you, and what kind of work are you doing these days?
Yeah, let's see. I'm a strange guy like you, buddy. I write books. So I've got a number of books. My first book, Step Back from the Baggage Claim. My second book, Remember. And my latest book, Thermostat Cultures. So I do a lot of writing, speaking, and consulting around leadership development and culture and clarity around mission, vision, and values. And lucky to, collaborate and support teams and organizations all over the world.
Now, I'm curious if you're like me. I mean, I was doing a lot of culture talks and culture workshops and culture this and culture that. And then, I did 70 remote focused things, and my organization's 100% remote. So that was an easy thing, but like kind of the culture stuff and the employee stuff kind of disappeared for a moment. There's not a lot of leadership, and I'm sure there is, but like wasn't a lot of people calling me for leadership development. It was, can you help me with my remote team and how to lead a remote team? So I'm curious if you're getting sort of that filter right out of that lens right now.
Yeah, I think the shift that everybody's experienced this last year, it caused everybody to realize, oh, shoot, we've now asked people to be remote, to quarantine, to socially distance, and yet we don't want our teams and our people to be disconnected and disengaged. And so how we develop people and still think about the mindset that we want to bring to leading, and then the culture that we're trying to create, even if it is remotely, but staying connected and aligned around why are we doing this and what are we trying to accomplish together and what direction are we pulling. All of that has had to be even more strategic and intentional in this kind of remote environment. So I've had actually, it's been totally different. I'm not on big stages and keynotes and stuff, like I'm sure you were doing a ton of too.
Right.
But it has shifted to virtually, and more places realizing, man, we need a strategy of how we engage, develop, and continue to create the culture we want.
Now we've seen a sort of a lot of different things I think could really happen out of this. I mean, people realize remote work works. I think a lot of companies, a lot of people realize maybe their culture wasn't as good as they thought it was. I often think the word culture gets hijacked for a lot of things. It's not really what it's meant to be. And being a leadership guy, I'm wondering if that term leadership has been hijacked. I mean, is that something you think that we ought to be taking a look at?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I've been saying that to groups all over the world lately. Is the term leadership has been hijacked, and what I mean by that, and also what I think teams and organizations are experiencing is we've had many, many, many different examples of people that have been in positions of leadership across companies, organizations, governmental positions. You fill in the blank, whoever you picture in your mind that. Have been in positions of leadership, but haven't exactly been leading and or compelling people, aligning and bringing people together, connecting people. And so this term leadership, we throw it around so loosely and say, hey, we need more leadership, or next time we wish we would lead better. But yet many teams and organizations are now realizing, hey, we better redefine what is it we mean by authentic and compelling and exceptional leadership, because many of the examples maybe that we've been looking at they might be in positions of leadership, but aren't exactly leading in a way that brings people together.
I often find too, the word leadership, when I think about it being hijacked, is also that it is a black or white statement, that it is you're either a leader or you're not, right? You're either the manager or you're not. You're either this knight in shining armor or not, right? There's whatever the stereotypical bullcrap sort of idea of what a leader is. And yet I find some of the best leadership is done by people on a part-time basis. It's done by people who would not call themselves a leader. They would not apply to be, the SVP of whatever, right? They're very happy in what they're doing, but they provide leadership every day on small teams and small projects and with clients and driving initiatives. And so I don't see a lot of conversation around that softer part or that smaller bit of leadership. And yet it's probably, I think it's of the most important inside of an organization. So how do you think we should start to foster that or change that perception?
Well, I think it starts with redefining what do we mean by, again, that term leadership, because how we think about leadership impacts the way that we show up. And so if what we think about leadership is that old model that I heard you even describing, which is that it's only about title, or it's about, it's that black and white, do I have the position or do I not, right? It's that if that's what you think about leadership is about being at the top of the pyramid and barking out orders and telling everybody what to do behind you, then that's the way you'll show up in every room. And yet when we really step back and redefine what does exceptional, compelling, influential leadership, it's really people that outside of title, I mean, yes, hopefully by title, they're also leading, but people across, no matter what, everyone is a leader in the sense that somebody's watching how you show up to do what you do and taking cues from you on how you do it, no matter what role it is that you play. And the best studies and research and all this backs this up, that the most influential leaders are the ones that, even if they are the one by title that are at the top of the pyramid, they actually flip that pyramid upside down in their own mind and their own heart. And they see that what it means to lead is actually to serve, to support, to put other people in positions, to rally people around a common mission bigger than us. All of those things that don't require a title in order to do.
Yeah. And that's, I think it's super important. I mean, anyone that wants to, help more or lead more, whatever word you want to use. I mean, I also found that if you just took on that responsibility, if you just filled in that gap where leadership was needed, people are generally pretty willing to let you do it, right? I mean,
oh, absolutely.
You can run into a wall every once in a while and you ask for forgiveness, not permission. And that's fine, right? You can navigate that inside an organization. But I've often, seen people that want to become a leader, but they never fill those gaps or, fill in those cracks where they could demonstrate their abilities, get the practice at it, get comfortable with it, learn more, right? And others, and maybe they're just more extroverted by nature or whatever, just sort of show up and take over, right? And so they're getting the light shined on them and other people are kind of being left out. And some of my best leaders in my organizations are introverts, right? But we had to kind of help them fill that role in a way that made sense for them to become comfortable.
Yeah. And I think the best teams and organizations are engaging people introverts and extroverts and functionally across roles in a conversation around what does it mean to truly show up and to lead, and what does influential and exceptional leadership look like to us. And then all of us play a role in creating that culture where that no matter what your role is, that we all have how we show up to the work that we do. That becomes the air that we breathe within an organization.
Yeah. Well, especially with how things are going these days, and maybe our environments are constantly changing, and they may be changing again. I mean, I just got an alert. Texas decided to go 100% maskless and all businesses are open. So we're going to see rapidly across the country very big differences on how people are working and living. And, what do you think is a meaningful work environment? Let's say in the near term here, right? What does that look like, and what should leaders or what should organizations be thinking about it as they're maybe pivoting a little bit and creating a slightly different culture to kind of adapt to all of that?
I love the question, because I think it's a fascinating thing. Everybody's talking about the future of work right now and trying to imagine what's this going to mean. And in fact, on my podcast, the one that I host called The Thermostat, I just had some researchers from the University of Penn on recently, that the amazing research that they had done. Wes Adams and Tamara Miles are their names, that did these researchers. And as on my podcast, we talked about this amazing research, which they admittedly, they talk about, they went into this research of trying to find these main principles and studying all the most exceptional company cultures that created these amazingly meaningful work environments. And they thought they were going to undiscover this secret sauce, this something we've never found or ever, they were going to be the ones, the explorers that found the one thing that nobody had thought of. And really, of course, what you and I know, and what we all know, is what they discovered is meaningful work environments have some of the same principles. And no matter what the changing times are, some of the same things exist. Like, is there a connection to something greater than them? Do people feel a connection to purpose and meaning? Is every person, no matter what role across the company, are they involved in playing a participatory role in how do we create the culture, and even in discussion about what do we want the culture to become? Are we honoring people in their whole life, thinking about what's important to them outside of work? And are we being creative about comp and benefits and all that align them with things that matter to them? All of these things that we already know, but they found these kind of 10 principles that in many ways you sit back and you say, well, yeah, how do we not know this? And it's not that we don't know it, but it's that many teams and organizations just unfortunately haven't gotten great about implementing them, executing them, actually living these principles. That really it's about proactive and intentionality around creating the culture that we want. I talk a lot about setting the temperature and creating a thermostat culture. And so it's about that intentionality around, do we even know what that culture is that we want? And then what are those actual things we're going to put into place in order to set that temperature?
Yeah. And I think that's, I guess it kind of maybe then is a good segue to this idea of a thermostat. And so, if we're looking at temperature and we're looking at maybe our culture from a thermostat type of an analogy or metaphor, whatever it is, how do those things relate? Do we have different gauges on different things? Do you think that people need to be monitoring? I mean, I know in my work, I have these 7 pillars, right? I think there are 7 things that companies always do really well that are great cultures. And it's easy if you say, well, okay, there's the 7. Oh, yeah, number 6, we're not so good at that one. Like, we really struggle with that one right now. Okay, well, that's where you put your energy, right? That's the lever. That's the thermostat that's running low, right? Or maybe it's a gas gauge. Maybe that's a better analogy. I don't know. But that's where you can kind of figure out, we're okay here. We're okay here. Oh, this is down. Remote work has made it harder for us to be transparent, or harder for us to have measurement. And okay, how do we fix that? But how do you think companies should be approaching it from if we want to shape that culture? Are there different thermostats they should be reading, on a regular basis?
Yeah, well, no, I love the image of the thermostat because I think it's really easy for people to quickly get their heads around. And in my book, Thermostat Cultures, I talk about it. Too many leaders, teams, and organizations get stuck in what I refer to as thermometer thinking, which means if we don't have, the first thing we have to have is we have to have clarity around, well, what is the culture that we're trying to create? So on this team or across this entire company, what is the culture that we want of the way we think, act, and interact every single day? And when we don't have clarity together on what we want that culture to be, of how we show up to do the work that we do, then our thinking is purely reactionary. And so like that thermometer, all it does is react. And every single day, the culture that you experienced is scattered and inconsistent depending on who's in the room and how we're feeling and what externally is happening around us.
Right.
But the best are the ones that go through that process to begin to understand first, well, we have to know, well, what is the temperature that we want to set? And so rather than just being reactionary like that thermometer thinking, we've got to be proactive to be able to say, okay, here's the culture that we want, the temperature that we want to set. And then we've got to get, like those levers and those measurements that you're talking about, then we've got to get clear on, okay, how are we calibrating our thermostat? And it doesn't mean we're perfect. So if we begin to get clear about that temperature that we're trying to set in our organization, then we have to return to those metrics and be able to say, well, how are we hiring? And are we aligned with the way that we're hiring, on the way that we're onboarding, the way that we're doing performance evaluations, the way we're recognizing and appreciating our employees, the way that we're developing emerging leaders, and the way our leadership team embraces the values of the companies? All of those things are examples of, we have to return to them and look at how are we doing, and how do we recalibrate the thermostat? And many teams and organizations get great at taking the temperature. We do pulse surveys, employee engagement surveys. Right. We do all these things, which have their place and are important things. But we get really good about taking the temperature and then not doing anything with it. And so once we learn and have feedback from our people, or we look at those measures, those gauges, then the important work is not that we know what the temperature is, but then we intentionally put actions and processes and structures in place to then say, well, what are we together going to do to set a different temperature and calibrate the thermostat to what we want?
Well, I love that idea because, what are the things we have to do? So the thermostat example, right? Do the things so that we have a good environment, right? We have the right environments at the perfect temperature. It may fluctuate slightly, but what's that generally good temperature? We all can be here and be happy and comfortable in what we're doing. If you could take the opposite, right? Which is that thermometer is just, is it hot? Is it cold? I mean, you could be standing outside in Chicago on one day of the year and it's miserably hot and miserably humid. And another day of the year, it's freezing cold and you're going to die if you don't get inside, right? I mean, if all you're doing is reading what's happening and not impacting what's happening, right? So to take the example even farther, right? You get central air and central heating, and what is the things your organization is doing to directly control what's happening so that people are living inside of this livable band of what's acceptable, right?
That's perfect, Chris. Like what you're saying is absolutely perfect, because those examples, and again, when you referenced a few minutes ago, is when everything that happened this last year, global pandemic, civil unrests, issues of social justice, political uncertainty, economic uncertainty, where are my kids being schooled? All of those things collide. Teams and organizations that didn't have clarity around, not just what we do, but how we're committed to doing it together, all of a sudden they were left then, and all of their people scattered and isolated and working remotely, disconnected. Then they are, like you're describing, one day it feels really cold and another day it feels really hot. And the temperature just goes up and down. But the teams and the leaders and the companies that had clarity or were already on the journey of finding clarity and committed to, hey, this is the temperature we're going to set, then they were able to say, all right, everything that's happening in the world right now that's out of our control, we can't worry about. We've got to make sure that we focus what is within our control and with each other, and how are we going to respond? What's the temperature we're going to set? And so if we're...
there's another great place to kind of make another point, which is Think about when you're doing your job, if all you were, and every day you show up to your job in, a t-shirt and jeans, right? And a pair of tennis shoes. And every day you don't know what that temperature is going to be. And so what do you spend your time doing? You spend your time looking for a jacket or a sweater, or you find a way to get a pair of shorts or different pair of shoes, or if suddenly your work is raining and you're wearing tennis shoes and not rain boots, you will spend your time trying to figure out how to improve your comfort, to change the environment that you're in, instead of doing your work, instead of doing the things that will help you be successful and your company be successful, right? You're just spending all of your time trying not to be miserable in that current temperature of whatever that may be. And I think that's the part that organizations forget. They think people come, they have a job, that they'll figure it out. If they're spending any percentage of their time worrying about that stuff, right, it's a problem. And I think that's why remote work is so great. That's why we're huge fans of it, is I take out so many variables by allowing people to be in the environment they want. They have their desk with their thermostat set how they want it, with the food they want, and the lack of a commute, and all those things have been removed. And all they have to do is worry about, how do I do my best work today?
And my guess is that you've taken some of those, again, the way that we define culture, like you've taken some of those tangible things around them, like an office space and work, and some of those things out of the equation. And you've allowed them to have the autonomy to say, hey, well, what is the temperature that you want in your own remote work environment? But my guess is also, for you all to be successful, you also have some non-negotiable and some clarity around, in this remote working environment, this is how we're going to be most successful together.
Right.
And this is the temperature that we're going to set of how we show up to do that work together, and how we collaborate, and how we bring out the best expertise in each other, how we lean on each other, how we challenge each other, and how we support each other in these unique times. That I'm guessing that you still, even though you're remote, you still have clarity on those things. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. And I'll give people an example, like, what is a non-negotiable? We highly discourage one-on-one meetings in our organization. Highly discourage them. Now, there are certain situations where they need to happen. But otherwise, why would you get on the phone with just one person, right? Unless there's power, politics, or you're just lazy and slow. Because if you could meet with 2 or 3 people or 5 people, you can get more ideas. You can get the information moved around the organization faster. You can get, buy-in and execution done. If I have a really good idea, I talk to 4 other people, we brainstorm, we figured out, and in 15 minutes, we're off to the races. I literally see other organizations, that person has 5 one-on-one phone calls and then has to go back and have a few more to kind of connect all the dots with everyone. They've gone 2 or 3 days. They've got no traction. They've not moved. So we hate that, right? That's like nails on a chalkboard to our organization. We want to team it up, group it up, almost like a sports team. Let's get in the huddle real quick. What play we run? Okay, great. And then we're off and we go. So that's something for us that sets that temperature, right? Helps us keep the right thermostat setting going, so that we can be very quick and not waste time on meetings, not waste time, negotiating with 5 people on 5 different, conversations.
Yeah, no, and that's a perfect example for what is right in one place and works really well, but you've got to have clarity, because somebody else coming into your environment may have done it differently in another place. And so you've got to negotiate, okay, well, what is the right way that we do it? And so you've found, hey, for us, this is the temperature and this is our commitment to how we're going to communicate and work together. And what I'll say to you, and I'm sure you've experienced, which is probably one of the reasons what led you to that decision, is, there's an epidemic within teams and organizations of meeting for the sake of meeting. And so, we kill people death by meeting, because everybody, and so part of it is we have to realize, at the right elevation, are we having the right conversation at the right elevation about the right priority and with the right people involved.
Right.
And oftentimes organizations, like, I do believe there's time and place to have a great one-on-one conversation. But what I hear you saying is, let's not just have one-on-one conversations when the right people that are needed to be in the room are 3 or 4 other people that are going to raise the priority and raise the conversation to a higher elevation. Right. Similarly, we don't want to be talking about somebody else who's not in the room, in a one-on-one conversation when they're down the hall or they're remotely. Right. Like, we want to make sure we've got the right people, the right conversation, the right priority at the right elevation. And teams and organizations that get better at seeing, okay, how does that work for us and what's the way that we're committed to doing it, are the ones that are more effective. They communicate better, and then they waste less time, like you're talking about. They're often running on the right stuff.
Well, I certainly hope that people can check out your book. Where can they find that if they're interested in picking that up?
You can all the normal book places. I mean, Amazon, of course, jasonvbarger.com. If you just go to Jason V as in Victor, Barger, BARGER.com, you can check that out, and or at Jason V Barger on social media is other ways you can track down and learn stuff.
Well, it sounds like that's the best way to get a hold of you as well. So hopefully people can track you down if they're interested in having you help their teams, if they want to read more about your books and everything that you're doing. Good luck with all the great work you're doing in your podcast, and really appreciate you being on the show today.
Chris, great to see you again. Keep up the great work, and thanks to everybody out there who's tuning in.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for tuning into today's show. Hopefully you've gained something you can use in your own career in a positive way. Until next time, do what you love and show the world how talented you can be today.
You've been listening to Talent Talk Radio, brought to you by People G2.